How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on tonight.
Yes, thank you. So, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to finally be on. You're talking about a topic that's definitely warranted, and I'm just excited to kind of get into it.
Yes, and you've been making your rounds this week. You were on Spotlight the other day, and who knows what else you've been doing. So, you have been very much in demand. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to actually join us tonight. On a Friday night of all nights. So, I really
No
appreciate
problem.
that. And
No
so let's give
problem.
everyone on Instagram a little teeny bit of history. So I actually just recently met Corona because Corona is
Mhm.
about to release her first book, or maybe even first sets of books. And so we had a conversation about her journey to becoming an author. And so during that conversation, I learned about Corana's profession. And I was just like, oh my God, I need to be able to have this conversation with you. So it's just
Mhm.
amazing. And then we have some other mutual contacts. So it was amazing that we were able to connect. And so I'm going to
Yeah.
kick off the podcast, and then we're going to start talking to you, and you're going to take the floor. So I am
Okay.
Kenyatta Gray of Girls Love, Flights, Feelings, and Fashion. And tonight we are going to be talking with a mental health professional. I know a lot of you probably could use some of the information that she's going to share with us tonight. And guess what? It's like getting therapy for free. So, without any further ado, I want to go ahead and start by asking you, Corona, I know your name, but can you tell us again, for everyone that's going to live, what's your name, and give us just a little bit of background about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Corona Boston. I am currently an art therapist and psychotherapist in the DC area. I just want to because some people want to know where am I from and things like that. So I'm from Baltimore City, born and raised, and I stumbled across art therapy after taking a course at Boise State University in music, art, and play therapy.
Wow.
I knew I wanted to be in this profession, but I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the different ranges and the different modalities. So when I came across art therapy, that really did spark my interest. And that's what led to me getting my master's degree at Drexel in creative arts and therapy. And I've been in this field working with mental illness, substance abuse, addiction,
Mm.
trauma for several years. Now I would say 20 years
Oh,
right
wow.
now.
Okay, so you are
Hmm.
very seasoned and probably have seen a lot of things. And so I know that you said you were interested in art therapy, but initially, what even started your interest in the mental health field?
Well, in high school, we actually had a partnership with John Hopkins. And with that partnership, the students had an opportunity to actually explore different career paths.
Wow.
So you had dentistry, you had nursing, and one of them was healthcare.
Hmm.
So during my junior year, I decided to actually do my internship at a Head Start program.
Okay.
And just working with children, seeing the families, it just really spoke to me. And again, coming from the inner city of Baltimore, being familiar with the population is something that I definitely wanted to just give back to my community. A lot of times we grow and we learn and we get all this information, but we never kind of take it back
Mm.
to that population so we can actually heal and
Yes.
actually change the whole trajectory of our young children's lives.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Someone that is motivated to give back and change the community for the good. I mean,
Yes,
that's what it's all about. That really is
yes,
what it's all about. I really
yes.
appreciate that. So, Corona, the focus of this particular live tonight is childhood trauma, because that's what we
Hmm.
were talking about when I first met you to talk about the book. Now, when it
Yes.
comes to childhood trauma, it is it's such a painful and it's such a touchy subject. But what I
Hmm.
wanted to know specifically is there a specific area of child trauma that you deal with, or do you deal with a whole wide range of child trauma issues?
So it's definitely a range that I've come across with childhood trauma. It's a very sensitive topic because it starts at the very age of 1 to 6.
Right.
And it can range from sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, mistreatment. But what I really see that comes through the pipelines is sexual trauma and also abuse and neglect.
Abuse and neglect.
Yes,
Hmm.
those are the primary cases that comes through. And yeah, so I just wanted to kind of answer that.
So when you say those are the primary cases that come through, can you explain to us how you become aware that these children are in danger?
So it's either going to be two ways. Either self-report, the child may say, hey, something that's happening to me at home, and this usually occurs at school.
Okay.
Or it may be some outside source. So it can be someone in the community that they see something and something just doesn't feel right. So they make a report.
Okay.
So the school, the church, any outside, sometimes even people's families, they make a report on their own family members if they feel as though abuse is taking place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so anytime a report of that kind is made, it's looked into. I mean, there's not a time where someone could call and they say, that just doesn't meet the threshold and we're not going to deal with
Mhm.
that. Most every
No.
call is taken seriously and addressed in some manner.
Yes, every single call is taken serious. I know some concerns are, well, I don't know for sure
Right.
if abuse is taking place, so I don't want to report. No, if you see something, say something. And the reason why I say this when it comes to children, because you may be their only mouthpiece, their
Mm.
only voice.
Hmm.
And it's one thing for you to just go on about your way, but it's another thing for that child to actually stay in and day out. And remember, if they're a child, they have 18 years left
Mm.
before they're actually out of the home. So you really can be making a huge difference. And another misconception is just because you do make a report that they're going to actually remove the child out of the home.
Okay.
Not so.
That's not true.
Right, that's not true.
Okay.
What they will do, they will come in and they will investigate to see whether or not it's a safe space.
Right.
If it
Okay.
is a safe environment and they realize that, maybe it was a one timer, because sometimes the parents can be overwhelmed and it may come across as a bit
Right.
abrasive and aggressive. But
Mhm.
when you kind of assess and look more into it, you just realize that maybe the parent need resources themselves,
Yeah.
counseling,
Yeah.
whatever they may need to kind of meet their needs,
Right.
housing, food, things of that nature.
Wow, that's amazing. And so I like what you said, and I didn't realize that that is what happens. That you don't take the child first and then figure out what's going on.
Mhm.
That you really do thoroughly investigate and then determine what the proper course of action should be. So that's very
Right.
interesting. I wasn't aware of that, and so I hope that my listeners are informed about that now, so that you don't have to fear, if you see something going on that you're going to automatically break up a home. But what you are doing is raising the alarm and, creating a situation where someone can take a look and see what's actually really going on. So
And,
that's really interesting. Um, so this is going to get a little touchy, but I really
okay.
want to know. So when it comes to children, what are some indicators that we can look out for when it comes to whether or not a child is being abused, mistreated in their environment?
Okay, so some of the signs is, looking for any change in their mood. Sometimes when it comes to pain, people handle it two different ways. They either turn it inward, and that will kind of look like depression, low motivation, hopelessness, or they'll take that pain and turn it outward. And that's when you have explosive behaviors, aggression, poor impulse control, things like that, mood swings, the inability to eat and to sleep.
Wow. Okay.
Sometimes what I notice with the child, they may have separation anxiety and not necessarily from the parent,
Right.
but actually from the provider or from the school teacher,
Right.
not wanting to leave them and return back to that unsafe environment. Also, bruises is
Mm.
another clear indicator.
Right.
And, one thing that we really do promote is just make sure that when your child get those exams, sometimes they do come back positive for certain types of diseases as well.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
So, Corona, if anyone, and including myself, happens to, observe something like that, any of those symptoms that you just discussed, who do I contact? How can I help? What's my next course of action?
So,
Would you call the
your next
police?
Yes, those are the two places or two sources you can name. It's the police and the place within your community that may have a hotline, child
Okay.
welfare, CPS, CFSA. It varies state to state, but those are the two places. And even within 911, or in the police sector, they have a unit that handles those type of special cases. So they will come out and they will investigate, and if they see that it is a concern, they will bring in child welfare.
Okay.
So it will eventually redirect back to child welfare because they really have a large gamut of resources and tools to make sure that that child is safe to determine whether or not they should stay in the home or be removed out.
So, Corona, is this like a 24-hour operation, or would someone need to
Yes.
wait till 9 o'clock Monday morning
No.
to place this call?
No. No. And I can speak directly from DC because that's where I actually, hold my license and do my practice. Is that DC has a 24 hour, 7 days a week,
I
morning,
see.
noon, and night. It doesn't matter, holiday or not, where you can call a hotline called CHAMPS. And it's a child mobile crisis unit that will come out to the community wherever you are and make that assessment as
Wow.
well. Hmm.
Amazing. All right,
Yeah, so the
DC area
resources are out
residents,
here.
if you're living outside of the DC area, how would they check to see what those kind of services are that you just mentioned that are available to DC residents?
So the good thing about the internet, sometimes it's just a click away.
Okay.
You can put in the slightest question, about how to make a report of suspected child abuse or assault, and the numbers will definitely populate. And what I love about it is that it's not only resources within your state or within your district, but it's also nationwide hotlines as well.
Oh, outstanding, outstanding. So, Karana,
Hmm.
we know that oftentimes, these things really don't get reported, and these
Hmm.
children grow up in these environments, and they become teenagers, and they become adults. So,
Yeah.
from your experience, can you explain what happens to a child that grows up never being exposed to trauma, but never received support or therapy or any kind of intervention? What happens to that person as an adult?
Well, you have to take in consideration when it comes to trauma. What makes it a traumatic experience is based on the individual's response to it,
Okay.
how it impacts them psychologically.
Okay.
So it varies person to person when you look at the intensity, the duration, the frequency. So one thing that I noticed is that a lot of times if adults or children go a long time with no type of treatment, what happens is that it really has the ability to distort their worldview,
Yes.
because they remain locked in a
Yes.
place of their pain and trauma. So they look at the world through a trauma lens,
Mm,
which does not give a good description on the reality. So,
right.
it's a lot of self-medicating that happens because
Yes.
PTS takes place and it's real.
Mm,
So you have those sleepless nights, you have those flashbacks, you have those intrusive thoughts, you have those pains that kind of comes out of nowhere. And so what happens is that people try to find a way to deal with it on their own.
mm,
So that's where
mm.
you got the self-medicating, drugs,
Yes.
food, risky behaviors, just an emotional numbness that takes place. And it's not until, because I always say healing, the prerequisite to healing is a decision. It has to be an intent decision to want to heal.
I agree with
Um,
that. Yes.
mhm.
Hmm. I agree with
Because it's
that.
definitely a journey and a process that's
Hmm.
there.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that because I can look at some things in my own personal life, and there had to be a decision that I needed to make, that I wanted to heal. And so, God,
Mhm.
that just resonated. But
Mhm.
for you to say that, like, I knew that that's what I felt, but for you to validate that, yeah, that's what happened, you made a decision, that's very helpful. So thank you so much for that.
And
Thank
it's so
you.
empowering. Yes.
Thank you. You just don't know. You just helped me a whole lot right now. So, Corona, primary caregivers. And so I want to emphasize for those that are on the live, when I say primary caregivers, I'm being respectful of the fact that families are made up in different ways. It's not necessarily going to be a mom or dad. It could be two moms, two dads, grandma, aunt, uncle, whatever. So for the sake of this conversation, when I say primary caregivers, I'm just speaking of whoever the adults are that are responsible for taking care of the children or the child.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I really want to know is a lot of times these things, abuse, neglect, these things go on in families, right? And I want to know from your perspective, why is it that these kinds of issues that somebody might know Aunt Susie has been doing this to kids for 10 years, or Uncle Joe has been doing what he's doing for 10 years. But why do families keep this a secret and allow this to continue? From your experience, why does that happen?
So, from my experience, what I notice is sometimes it's the stigma.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't want to be labeled as the family where that type of act took place. So they rather say out of sight, out of mind. We don't want to hold that over anyone. Sometimes it could just be overwhelming shame and guilt.
Mhm.
Just knowing that this was happening and you were aware of it, but yet you did nothing and remained silent. And then what I also notice is that sometimes people rather stay in the unknown because they're not ready to do the work that comes along with the confrontation.
Yes.
And it's
Right.
a degree of confrontation. And I'm saying that people hear confrontation, they automatically think that it's negative, but it's not, it's positive.
Right.
Because a lot of times, like you said, the child who's actually going through it, they're going through something. They need to be saved. They need to be heard. They also need to be addressed. But some people don't want to confront that because they just are not ready to do the work. And
Yeah.
sometimes the perpetrator is someone that is a loved one to them. It can be their spouse. It can be their favorite uncle or their favorite cousin or their child. So a lot of times people would rather stay in the dark and not deal with it and not actually understand um, the healthy component that comes along with being able to emotionally rescue that person.
Right.
Because a lot of, and even like the survivor of trauma, sometimes they kind of say, how come this person knew? How come they didn't do anything? How come they didn't say anything? And they
Yes.
just want to hear that validation from that person. And
Yes.
sometimes they never get it, and it holds their healing captive. And
Yes.
that's why I say healing is a personal choice. That's something that no one can never take away from you. No one
Yes.
can never control, whether they acknowledge it or not. You know the truth. And that's another thing that I come across, is that sometimes parents say, well, I don't believe the child.
Right.
You may not believe the child. It may not be about truth, but it's about their experiences. And if you love that person and they're telling you that's their experiences, as a parent, if you're emotionally attuned, you definitely want to make yourself available to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that.
Exactly. Wow. So, oh boy, this is deep. This is deep. Well, when it comes to talking to your kids and trying to educate them, on understanding boundaries and what's appropriate physical contact and what's not, at what age do you suggest starting those conversations, and what would that conversation really look like?
I feel like I'm so glad you're having this platform, because a lot of times we create more discomfort in areas that don't need to be uncomfortable.
Right.
Because when it talks about raising a child and molding them and shaping them, we can talk about their emotional wellness. We can talk
Mhm.
about their social wellness. But when it comes to like body safety, we remain silent.
Right. Right.
So
Yes.
you start talking about that at the age, I say around 3, 5 years old, as
Really?
soon as the child
Okay.
can start talking, can start really comprehending. Because remember, you're sending your child, for some families,
Yeah.
you're sending your child off to daycare. You're sending your
Yes.
child off while you go to work. So the more education and awareness and the language and the words that they have, they can articulate it as soon as something is wrong. So we
Yes.
always talk about those internal warning signs and red flags.
Hmm.
If you're educating them about that, as soon as someone does something, a red flag will go up in that little child, and they
Yes.
will be able to come back home and tell you about what happened.
So, Corona, when I think about, having those conversations about inappropriate physical contact, if we're talking about a 3-year-old, and a lot of times parents want to use little fuzzy, nicey words, but should you use words like penis, vagina, anus when explaining, or when trying to educate your child about what could be inappropriate touching? Like, how do you say those things to a 3-year-old?
So, this is where I do kind of respect, because it is a level of cultural competency that comes along with this. So it's like when we're
Okay.
talking about such a touchy subject, I don't want to completely push away the parent's language. So
Okay.
to me, as long as the language translates into that body part,
Okay.
that's a good job.
Okay.
The point is being aware. But if the child just say, "Oh, it's my whole body," but they can't say that it's my top or it's my bottom,
Hmm.
or it's that place where mommy wiped me, or the place that daddy may
Yes.
clean, or the place that. So again, it's about giving the language that
Okay.
has that same definition
Okay.
that translate back to that household, but
Okay.
not making it just, oh, it's just the body. No, it's
Right.
variations and differences within that body, and you need to be aware of what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah. All right,
Hmm.
good. Okay, that's good to know because I have a 1-year-old grandson, and it's about time we start, talking to him. And so I wanted to know, for my own personal benefit, should we use those words? So as long as we use language that he can relate to and it connects to body parts, then that's
Hmm.
okay.
Yes. And
Yes.
again, whatever is comfortable within that household. Because remember, that parent, like, because I can do all the teaching, all the education, but they have to do the implementation of it on a
Yes.
daily basis. So I have to
Yes.
have alignment, and I have to have some buy-in, just to make sure that what I'm teaching you is body safety and you're comfortable with using this type of language. So if you
Right.
have a household where it's okay to say penis or vagina,
Yeah.
or chest, or whatever the language may be, that's okay.
Okay. Good to know.
Because
So
it's not, yeah.
say it again, Corona.
No, I was just saying because it's not like it's a bad or dirty word, so they could never get in
Exactly.
trouble for it, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So, Karana, we know that often children do experience things and they go to the person that they think they can trust the most, whoever that caregiver is, and the caregiver does nothing. They don't
Hmm.
believe what the child is saying. What happens to the child when they are, told that it's a lie, you're making it up? What happens to the child's, what happens to their mind? What happens to them?
Yeah, so unfortunately, kind of going back to like when you were talking about what are some of the warning signs, what are the things to look out for. So if a child goes um, untreated or remains in that unsafe environment, you will see all those signs. So you'll continue to see the bruising, you'll see the mood swings, the aggressive outbursts, the depression, the social withdrawal, the irritability, like all of that will continue to show its face until some type of intervention is in place. And what I've also seen in my line of work, unfortunately, is that sometimes the caregivers, they do not want to acknowledge even if they know, sometimes it's one thing for you not to know, but it's one thing to know that it's happening, so like I was saying before, sometimes we have caregivers who have been undiagnosed themselves and been through trauma, don't quite
Right.
understand what abuse really is because it's
Right.
been normalized within their family for so long.
Right.
Sometimes, the perpetrator is actually the supporter of the household,
Right.
don't want to kind of compromise that, even though
Yeah.
they're compromising their child's health and their wellness and their future. Addiction, mental illness, some of the stories I've heard is that sometimes the child is being sold deliberately, to support a habit or an addiction. So it really does range.
Gosh. Okay. So, Corona, as a caregiver of a child, you know, we see all of the stories. We see things that happen on nanny cams, that are just scary. But what can we do at our level best, but the best of our level best, to protect our children from being a victim?
So again, making sure that we teach our child about boundaries, how to say no, what are their
Okay.
rights, being able to make sure that they get tested, providing supervision for them. A lot of times parents are very trusting of different people supervising their child, really looking into that.
Gosh. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-mm-mm-mm. This is
Mm-hmm.
deep. Oh my God. Just is making me think about situations that I know that other people have been in. And yeah, I almost want to cry about it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep it moving. Uh
Mm-hmm.
for you as a mental health provider, I have read so many occasions, and I actually have a cousin who was a social worker in inner city Detroit.
Okay.
And she was so gung-ho about this career. It was everything she ever wanted. And she got into the career, and because of all of the different kinds of unimaginable trauma she was helping to deal with and navigate, she got burnt out, and she is no longer in that profession. And my question to you is, in your profession, in your role, like, how do you prevent compassion burnout, or rather, how do you manage compassion burnout?
So, I mean, you're right. It comes with this profession. It's not for everyone, and I just want to speak not just a burnout, but also how do I keep from being vicariously traumatized from
Oh,
hearing other stories,
yes.
um, and I've things that are unmanageable, not just for children, but any human being. So it's definitely difficult to sometimes digest. But what I really do love is that I have a very strong, supportive colleagues, so
Okay.
we're licensed professionals, we do peer reviews, we talk to each other, we have that outlet, really being an advocate for self-care.
Yes.
Also my spirituality, my
Yes.
spirituality keeps things in perspective,
Yes.
so I can be able to show up and not so much fall into, even though I
Right.
can be empathetic and be compassionate, but
Right.
understanding that I have a role, and my
Right.
role is not just to be where they are and stay where they are, but have enough emotional capacity to bring them also to another place. So
Okay.
just understanding that you also have some limitations as a professional clinician. A lot of times we come in like, I want to save everybody. I want this to completely stop.
Right.
That's not a realistic lens.
Right.
You cannot save everyone. You cannot help every single one. I,
Right.
stress this with my team. We may be responsible for the process, but not the outcome. That's that person's individual choice and right. But what I want to do is make sure that when they are in front of me, that I'm there, I'm present, I'm supportive, and just able to kind of hear their journey and actually help guide them as well.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank God for you. And this is a kind of like an offshoot of that question. because we know that in certain professions, people become desensitized to the human part of people. And so, have you ever experienced a mental health professional that's dealing with this constant trauma, but somehow they just disconnect, and an abused child just becomes another abused child to them?
I think that's when they need to unplug,
Okay.
because the very thing that we're trying to teach that client,
Yeah.
which is how to become emotionally attuned, not emotionally numb. But if
Yes.
I can't even model that as your therapist, that's when I need to kind of step back and say, okay, when someone detach, it's like we talked about it earlier, those red flags, those internal
Yes.
red flags. You're detaching for a reason.
Right.
You're unplugging from that particular situation for a reason. It's hitting home, and for some reason, you can't handle the emotions that come along with that.
Right.
So you may have to kind of process that on your own time,
Okay.
but don't dare bring that into the session and take
Yes.
or rob them of what is needed.
Yes.
So sometimes that does happen. So we have to do our self check-ins ourselves.
Okay.
We're not exempt from that. But if you
Right.
have someone, a professional who's able to kind of have that full awareness that I am a human, I have limitations, I
Yeah.
have to do my check-ins as well. I have to recognize when, hey, this is a little bit too much for me. I may have to kind of bring in a colleague or maybe
Right.
refer you out, just kind of understanding that. So that does happen sometimes.
It does happen, but it sounds
Mhm.
like, at least in the DC mental health area, that there is support, there's resources, and I like the fact that you said that your team, you guys look out for each other and you support each other. So that is very helpful. I'm like thinking about my own work environment. Do I have people that look out for me? I'm not sure. So, but I'm glad that you do in your profession.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to kind of,
Okay.
talk about something that's not so heavy. And matter of
Okay.
fact, it's something that you should be congratulated on. And that is, you're about to, or have you already released your first publication?
Yes, and it's coming soon. I will have pre-sales available at my website on October the 15th. So
Okay.
it's in the making, but yes, I'm so excited. It seems so surreal. Like I said, to be in this profession, to have the wealth of not just education, but experience, and now being able to take it and transform it into a literacy tool, I'm
Yes.
super excited about it.
So tell us, if you can, you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yes, yes, I'm excited to tell you about the book. So, it's called Your Secret Is Not Safe with Me.
Mm.
It was a collective project. Again, I've always been very family, community oriented. And so I wanted to get my sister involved, along with my nieces and nephews involved. And
Yes.
they range from 9 to 12 years old. And I wanted to just educate them too about the subject matter.
Yes.
And again, we do come from a family line of artists.
Nice.
So I wanted to actually use my nephews and nieces' illustrations in the book to
Yes.
not just to create, but to let them understand their uniqueness and give them a
Yes.
sense of accomplishment and to let them know that they can be great and they do have that name on something. They can strive, for
Mm-hmm.
whatever their heart desires.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, just to kind of pull it back into why I decided to actually write the book. I remember providing trauma therapy for a little girl. And she was first victimized at the age of 4,
Mm-hmm.
up to the age of 6.
Oh.
And so again, we talked about different types of trauma, so we talked about early childhood and complex trauma. So she came from a family of complex trauma where it was intergenerational, reoccurring. Her natural environment was just unsafe. And it was a place of denial because that's all they knew. It was normalized. So what I wanted to do was kind of go into her own community and select like good touch, bad touch, like that type of genre. But it
Yeah.
was nothing there about body safety at all. And, I checked in all the surrounding areas and it was nothing there. The only books that were available was actually through the school. But I said, this actually needs to be in the home. This needs to be in the hands of the caregiver. So that's what definitely motivated me and inspired me to say, I want to be able to kind of let people know that the child is not alone. Let the parents be aware that it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
And also with the book, there are resources, a learning tool. So I have information about body safety, how to communicate unpleasant conversations while also developing shameless solutions to it. Different types of touch, not just unsafe, but unwanted. So all of that, yeah. So all of that is in the book. So it's a learning tool for parents, educators, and clinical providers.
I cannot wait. And I see that Yakita has actually dropped the your website in
Yes.
on the live. So if you guys are
Hmm.
interested in purchasing this book, adding it to your library, if you're a mental health professional, if you're a parent, grandparent, caregiver, I think that this is a valuable resource to have in your library. So
Yeah.
we are almost at the end of this very informative, very rich, very sensitive conversation that is needed. I've participated in a lot of lives and
Mm,
interviews, but I have yet to participate in something that is as valuable that
mm,
we all need to be aware of. So I really appreciate you for sharing your profession, your talents, your passion, your interest with us. And so I want to give you an opportunity to really leave us with a final thought or a final message on the importance of children and their mental health.
okay. So one thing I just want to say is don't allow your fears or trauma to stop you from living out the destiny that you were born with. Because a lot of times people may feel like I've been victimized. My life is over. It's not. It's so much healing. It's so much more to your journey. People always, it sounds cliche when you hear it, but when you hear that turning your pain into purpose, I hear that a lot. I mean,
That's
it's
me.
real. Yeah, I hear it so many different
Yes.
places, and it's real and it's powerful. So I just want people to know that you can still change the whole trajectory of your life. It does not have to be viewed from a trauma lens for the
Yes.
rest of your life.
That is beautiful. That is empowering. That gives
Yes.
people hope. And so I hope
Hmm.
that you all take away that tremendous message that you don't have to stay where you are. There is hope. You can totally
Hmm.
turn this thing around. And so
Hmm.
I want to ask you one last thing, and that is,
Okay.
do you have a favorite quote? Usually I end my IG lives like, really on this partying high note, right? But my spirit
Mhm.
is telling me that that's not what I want to do today. I want to do something that's more substantive. So, do you have a favorite quote that just definitely inspires to you and speaks to your heart?
Yes. And actually, because I tuned in Tuesday, and I heard you basically ask that question to your guest speaker, Shanika. So I said, I'm going to be prepared Friday. If she asks me, I will be prepared for a song, But one of my favorite quotes, because like
We
I said,
can
I
do
listen.
a song if you want a song.
Okay.
I just didn't want to, I want to be sensitive, right, to our conversation and, then be like, hey, girl.
Oh no, it's actually aligned with the actual topic. And it's by Tasha Cobbs. And maybe while you're planning, I can say the quote. But the
Yes.
song is, what is it? No Longer a Slave to Fear
Okay, let me see.
by Tasha Cobbs. Hmm.
Alexa, play Tasha Cobb, No Longer a Slave to Fear.
To Fear. Hmm.
Fear No Longer Slaves, live by Tasha Cobbs Leonard on Amazon Music.
Can you hear it? never heard this song.
Okay.
I'm no longer a slave to fear. Yes. For I am a child of God. Yes. Let's make that loud. I'm no longer a slave. Girl, you gonna have me on here worshiping.
Okay, and I can say the quote. Are you ready for the quote?
What's your quote?
If I change the direction of how I think, I can change the direction of how I live.
Yes. Yes. And on that note, I want to say thank you, Corrona, for sharing your gift, your passion, your love, your expertise with us. I know that what you have said has touched someone, it's sparked someone to think about something differently. And I want people to leave this live really being an observer of what's going on around you. Please don't turn a blind eye. If you see something, like Corrona said, say something. And on that note, I cannot wait to get your book. I cannot wait to see you at the top. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you. I am
you.
so honored to have had this conversation with you, and have a very, very good night. And I'm going to blast this song real quick. All right, y'all. This is Tasha Cobb.
Yeah.
Hey.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all. This is Kenyatta. I will see y'all next week. This is Girl Love, Life,
Bye.
Feelings, and Fashion. Good night. Have a good night, Corona.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.